Right, so welcome everyone to another episode of Motogp Mac, and today we're going to go through loads. How are you doing, lads? How's Jake and how is Ghost Rider?
Hunky dory.
Good to
Hey,
see you
Dory.
guys.
Yeah, great to see you. It's been a while, actually. It feels like it's been a while since we did a podcast, but it's only been like 5 days, or maybe 6. But yeah, I suppose we'll start off today's podcast. I don't know, did you see all over the news and Instagram and the book of face? Mark is out in his 600 again today.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't seen it back.
Have
I
you?
didn't see it, but I believe it. Was it at that same track that the go-kart track?
Yeah, it's a small little toy track.
Yeah.
So like
He always goes back to the same track.
yeah, he looks like he's flying on it, and I suppose look, you can't blame him, right? Like those go-kart tracks, they're small, they're tight, they work you out. Do you know what I mean? And like I'm very happy. I'll be very honest, lads. I'm very happy to see him on a 600 rather than on a MotoGP bike at the moment. I know people will probably shoot me for saying that, but you know, my view is I think he just needs time on a bike for a while. You know, I was really concerned in Aragon when I saw him icing up the shoulder or icing up the elbow and the shoulder after doing 20 laps. Do you know what I mean? You're kind of like going, is he really ready? Do you know what I mean? If he needs that sort of drastic action of putting it into ice, now, and it wasn't, I would say something if it was just icing it, as in putting a cold pack on the shoulder, but he was dipping this into a bucket. Do you know what I mean? So for me, it was like really trying to take down the inflammation or whatever that was happening. But he did say, yeah, he did say that, you know, that he was struggling with it day one. It did get a bit better on day two, but of course it naturally would as you get the muscles back and the muscle memory. So for me, I'd be happy to see him do 5 or 10 days on a, not in a row obviously, but on the 600, and then maybe threaten to come back towards Malaysia and thing, because when you look at the calendar, lads, we have Aragon this week, we have Japan next week, and then I think we have Thailand the following week. So 3 races in 3 weeks.
That's a crazy schedule.
Yeah,
It is. Yeah,
Especially when you consider how they struggled last time with the planes to get from Argentina to America and the long haul from, where was it? Was it Indonesia to Argentina in the first place?
yeah. No, like it's going to be really, really interesting. Like, so the whole logistical thing. Now, look, a lot of the restrictions in countries as well, and this, that, and the other, are gone. So I think it will make things
bit easier.
just that little bit easier. Now, look, it's still a big thing to get done. Do you know what I mean? To get the whole lot of those transported. Now, there's actually a plane channel on YouTube that actually follows different series around. So I was actually watching one time where they were doing the Formula One. I think it was from Baku to another track, but it was absolutely crazy how they did it. But anyway, I think, you know, for the whole logistics of it, like wrap up, do you know what I mean? Crazy. Look, it's brilliant.
Loading freight onto planes, trucks, planes, movement, all unpacking the other end.
Yeah,
I used to work on carnivals years ago. Sorry for digressing a little bit, but I started on carnivals years ago. It was one of my first jobs, and we'd roll into town, and it'd be a nightmare to build. I used to work on those. You know the Walser ride?
Yeah.
Had a wooden track, a big round track with the cars that spun, and the weight. It was a nightmare to build it, and it was a nightmare to take it back down again. But something like that. You're there one night and you've got next.
Exactly, yeah, and like they were just saying with Formula One, like about 2.5 to 3 hours, the garage is already taken down. Do you know what I mean? And packed and almost ready to be loaded onto the truck. And it's just, I suppose, look, it's a process. But anyway, it will be good to see Mark. I do have a little bit of the thing that I saw today. And I don't know, have Dorna jumped the gun? But, you know, for the Thursday press conference, who have they named?
Marc Marquez. Number
Marc Marquez.
93.
Yeah.
Really?
Now
Whether
it
he
does
likes
say
it or not, he's
it
going to
does-
be there. But he was
it
ready
does-
or not,
yeah,
here we go.
yeah, it does say TBC, but like, why would you put him on
up
there?
there.
Like,
Yeah.
if you don't know what he's, even if he's going to be there, so look,
They need him.
poss-
They need him. It just shows you how desperate the sport is to get the star attraction back. I was just watching a video today. I won't mention the name of the channel. I'm sure our viewers and you guys probably are aware of it. A young Italian guy, and he tends to dissect from not a negative point of
Devil's
some would say.
advocate. Yeah.
Yes. And he was showing, basically he was using Google searches to show different aspects of popularity in MotoGP. He could see interesting stuff. He was showing statistics, just using statistics from Google. The search rate compared to Formula One, for instance, compared to Superbikes, and he had them on a graph. But also he had most popular riders, and you can see in MotoGP the most searched rider in MotoGP still is Valentino Rossi, despite the fact that he's
Really?
not there. Yeah, but Marc Marquez was second. So if you think of the fact, and he was making the point, that viewing audiences have slumped right now at a point where the sport is at its all-time best.
Yeah.
It's probably better now than it's ever been in its history.
Yeah.
Yet the audience has tuned it in has nosedived, and the average age of the viewer is 34 years of age. And one of the big aspects of it is two superstars, Rossi and Marquez, have been absent this year so far. So Dorna are in a tight spot, guys.
Mhm.
They need to get their superstar back.
And that superstar needs time. What people are not bringing up is, when he broke his arm, right, and then it healed and it twisted, they cut it, right? They cut that bone and they rotated it, but the upper part of that bone is still twisted. So when they go to reattach those muscles and tendons, they're reattaching on spots that never had an attachment of muscle or tendon. Okay, that's all scar tissue, and I can tell you from experience, scar tissue is never as tough as the original tissue. It's got to be half the strength, right? So him going down at this point, especially at this point, could be devastating. I mean, that could be out, period. Now, will it ever really
massively?
And going out in that 600 is a very good idea because you need to have those what's called quick twitch muscle fibers get reconditioned. The muscle memory has to get reconditioned. You can't just go out and say, I'm going to do, it's like weightlifting. You stop, you're bench pressing 400 pounds, say, right? You can't go out and say, well, I'll do 375. It isn't going to happen the next, after an injury. You got to build up from 200, 210, 250,
Well, I haven't done that. I haven't done that myself. I'm coming back, and you were asking me last week, about my riding habits off air. And one of the reasons I'm not riding full time at the minute is due to injuries and due to some horrific accidents. But I can tell you, having come back from injury, and beginning to train again, it's quite frightening how much power that a person can lose, and how further back you end up being from a starting point in recovery.
Yep,
that's it. Look, that's genuinely it. Leave him come back in Malaysia. Leave him come back. To give him the time. He's given, my view is, he's given Honda the feedback that they've wanted. Do you know what I mean? He's confirmed an awful lot of things. He's confirmed that the bike is around top 10 pace. Do you know what I mean? It's not down towards the back. Do you know what I mean? So maybe it's not as doom and gloom. Well, it is doom and gloom, but it's not as doom and gloom as the other three buckos trying to ride the bike, right? So for me, I just think give him the time, give him the space. He probably will be back in Aragon, being honest, lads. Pooch will probably be think. But look,
well, I'd say he's not alone. Pooch, Carmelo, and the Repsol sponsors. I'd say there's a lot of pressure on him. But at the end of the day, guys, he doesn't have to do anything he doesn't want to do. If he's there,
very loyal. He's very loyal, and he's very habit forming. He's a habit. I mean, he lived at home till he was 30 years old, and his mom did his laundry. That kid he doesn't like
Mama's
change.
cooking.
Yeah, he does not like change whatsoever. To the point of being strange.
Yeah.
Well, look, each to their own. But look, I definitely look. I hope he's there, just not riding. That would be the way I would be on it. But Aragon, coming up now this weekend as well.
Looking forward to it, Mark.
Pecco versus
kind of tough track for physically.
It's a
hard.
I tell you, I was tired after 3 laps in the PlayStation. Oh man, it was just like but the championship, and I know I don't really want to talk about Pecco and Fabio in the championship because Pecco has asked us not to. I mean, now only joking. But Pecco won't think of the championship till he's 10 points behind. But like this is a real catching or a capital track for Pecco because the Yamaha is going to perform shocking. It's going to get murdered down the straight. It's a very slow corner.
I didn't think Aragon had a big straight.
Oh, it does. Yeah. And it comes out of a dirty right or dirty left-hander, 90-degree left-hander. So it's like it's all acceleration from first gear to sixth gear. Like, do you know what I mean? It is Yamaha's worst nightmare on a bike.
Shoot track.
Yeah. Well, no, just that section. Now there is a few fast-flowing sections, but the Ducati is good on that track. And I was only watching the. Do you remember years ago Marquez versus Pecco and how Pecco was just stayed so calm? Marquez kept throwing it up the inside, exact same corner every time, and Pecco was just like, "Thank you very much, thank you very much."
That was last year.
Was it last year? And it was just. It was just for me. It was just like it just showed like even the Honda couldn't catch the Ducati down the straight in the slipstream. Do you know what I mean? And it's like,
Honda has turned down the power. By the way, good.
Pecco, and like this is the thing I personally do believe is that this is a real Ducati track, and now there's some really fast riders and confident riders on a Ducati, right? If I was Fabio, I'd be very worried because we saw what happened to him in Misano. He qualified 5th, and he can get no further. Do you know what I mean? He couldn't catch anyone. Do you know what I mean?
He was trying hard. He almost got a long lap penalty for exceeding track limits. He was pushing so hard.
He was pushing.
It wasn't publicized very much, but
all of a sudden, but like this is my point is like he has another weekend like that, right? Like Pecco has closed 61 points in on him in 4 races.
It's serious achievement. But listen, when I seen that race,
not 61, I don't think it was. He was 66 points behind. He's 31 or
30, something. 31, yeah, it's 31. But the thing is, look, it's achievable mathematically. It's very realistic. And you know what? Watching that race, exactly what you described there, Mark, the Honda versus the Ducati last year, and the coolness and the calmness. He did make a swipe on him towards the end of the race. I think with 2 laps to go, and Pecco immediately passed him back again. I remember looking at that race and thinking, you know what, this is proven to me anyway, in my opinion, that Pecco has the mental capacity. He's got that mental toughness to be able to ride for a championship and to be able to put it up to the likes of Marquez. It raised my confidence in Pecco's stock, shall we say?
Yeah. And then he comes out and does stupid fecking mistakes at the start of the season, exactly what he did the year before, and put him into his. But now saying that, when we kicked off part 2 of the championship, just say after the winter break, he was only 5 points behind where he was the previous season. Fabio was 25 points behind where he was. So that, you know what I mean? So like, and like, Pecco comes on stronger and stronger the second part of the season. He seems to be still on for fucking Christmas holidays halfway to the summer. Like, do you know what I mean? Then goes to Ibiza, gets drunk, gets caught drink driving, and then has an amazing run of form after.
Yeah,
right.
He needed a couple shots to calm his nerves. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? We live in a very PC woke type of world these days. You know what? That type of behavior would have been applauded 20 years ago or 30 years ago.
Oh yeah.
The likes of Swanch or Rainey or doing in that era. You know?
I remember going to racing in Mondello Park and going to the nightclub in their leathers.
Yeah.
Skull and Pines.
Yeah.
If you could do lap 1 in the morning without vomiting, you were an absolute legend.
And Spain's limit is only 0.025. Do you realize how if you had
mouthwash?
Yeah, mouthwash and went out, they could hit you for it. They should make it 0 because then people would at least know I can't drink anything. Because at 0.025, you can't drink anything. In the United States, he wouldn't even got hit. He wouldn't have even been over.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
yeah. I just thought it was interesting, but I think this year could be a little bit different than like what we just saw in Misano at the last race, the Beast versus Pecco. I thought that was a squeaky bum race. If I was to ever
stop. Hanging on by the seat of my pants for the last couple of laps there.
He really impressed me. I mean, remember I said he made a good second rider, the Beast, because he wasn't as fast as Pecco. And what does he do? Jumps the speed. His raw speed just jumped after he got.
Yeah, but he was at home though as well. You know, so the two of them were, you know, fucking horned up to the gills and to go to a hooker's house. Like, do you know what I mean? There was nothing going to stop him there. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, what's his name? Domenicali wasn't too impressed with the Beast. Do you know what I mean? And I think, you know, brings up a thing of like there's a massive thing, and the Beast actually got a load of how would you say? So negative comments that he let Pecco win. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Bullshit.
And there was like no way, Joe. Like
No.
I do think he was trying to pass him into turn 4, but I do believe he bailed out because he knew he was going to hit the side of him. Do you know what I mean? So instead of going to the inside, he went outside. You know,
he lifted the back wheel of the bike, braking.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and it was the fastest lap of the race. How he's not sandbagging for God's sake?
No way, man.
No way.
No, I was just like, no, but like he got an awful lot of negative feedback saying, you know, like, oh, he let Pecco win, and Pecco then came out and was like, listen, look, I don't want any special treatment, or I don't want any team orders right now. If it's last race of the championship and I'm 10 points behind, do you know what I mean? And Fabio is 5 points behind me and I need to win, that's fine. That's very different. But you know, I just think, you know, I think next year, I think we're in for a treat. Like, Jesus, the two boys on the exact same equipment.
I think they'll start taking points away from each other, don't you?
Yeah, but I think, you know.
Well, I tell you what, we've got to consider. There's going to be a very different race format next year with the sprint races, which count as a race.
Yes.
And you've got different characteristics. You can see that Bastianini is not that. He's not as fast as Pecco in the beginning of a race. It takes a while to get up, and he seems to be very, like, let's be honest, he's extraordinarily good at preserving his tires and finishing a race. Now, how does he go with a lighter fuel load? Because they're not going to be carrying much fuel at the beginning of the sprint race, so that could change things up. And then, you know, you have 2 races in the weekend. You've got the different characteristics. He's back to his old format on the Sunday, so it's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, I think that sprint races are going to be a monkey wrench next year. I mean, I'd love to see them, but I was just telling Mac, I said, there's a big difference between the where you put on an engine for a 10-lap sprint race versus a practice session where you're starting, stopping, starting. The bike goes fast, cools down.
Yeah,
you know?
but that bike is turned up to the max as well for that race. Like, you know what I mean?
Exactly. It's also,
you know,
it's turned up to the max for that race.
You know, whereas like they might do 3 laps in a practice towards the end as a Hail Mary lap, but you know, in a race it's going to be 10 laps or 12 laps or whatever the race distance is at full tilt, like, do you know what I mean? So I wonder, it's going It's going to be interesting to see do Dornet take that into account in the regulations for increased engine wear. But I suppose, look, with Pecco versus the Beast next year, I think it's going to be super interesting. I think you're right. I think they're going to take points off each other, but I think it's going to be the first lot of 2 points, first and second. Do you know what I mean? Now there may come the time where they take each other out, which will be interesting as well.
Well, one factor is the risk factor is going to increase here massively. The risk of getting injured, of one of them becoming injured, is because let's call a spade a spade. Or both of them are going for it, so both of them are going to be giving it their all. It could be a case that one or the other of them could end up being injured.
They could
pretty quick.
They could, yeah. Look, I think personally myself, I think I think they're going to raise the game of everyone next year, and I do think take out left-hand turn tracks. I think Marquez may feel a little bit like Rossi, because I do believe that the level will move on another little bit. Do you know what I mean? Mark, don't get me wrong, Mark is still one of the best riders in the world, but Mark is getting old. Do you know what I mean?
He's a top 10 rider at the moment. Mark, in 2019 is 3 years ago. Mark, sorry for cutting in on you there. You're making a point, and I'll let you continue. But it's 3 years since he was that dominant rider, the Marc Marquez of old. We can only talk in terms of right now. Like, take all the injuries and everything out of the equation. His best finish recently has been a 6th position, a top 10 position, basically a captain scenario.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
it is, but I just think the evolution of riders coming through, they're just getting faster and braver.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And I suppose when you look at it, right, when you come into Moto 3, those bikes now have 140 horsepower. They're a little bit heavier, but they have 140, so they're quicker compared to the 2-stroke 125.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right, so they're immediately going faster. So it doesn't phase them now anymore. Then they go to the 765 Moto 2 compared to an old 250.
Yeah.
Okay, it weighs, but it's still faster. So these guys are all coming into this thing of boom, boom, boom. And when they throw their leg over a Motogp bike, there is zero fear. Whereas
and
before
it's not big, it's big a jump, as you're saying,
exactly.
Until they get hurt. Until they get hurt.
Until they get hurt. But I will tell you now, I know it's car racing and it's not really directly related to bike racing, right? But a fella in the Monza GP last weekend got appendicitis or something. And they called up a reserve driver to come into FP3. He got an hour and a half's notice. An hour and a half. He qualified the car in the top 10, and it's a back-rated team. And they asked him after, and he's like, oh, man, he's like, I had an opportunity, I just took it. He's like, I just drove it. Send it. Like, do you know what I mean? He's like, if I crashed, it's sure like everyone expects me to crash. I'm brand new into the team. I got an hour's notice to drive the car. Yeah. And then he got onto the race, and I think he finished like 13th or something, right? But I was just sitting there, and I was like, he beat his more experienced teammate, who's probably going to get sacked, right? But I just think that the young fellas now they're just wired that little bit differently. They'll push it and they'll push it and they'll push it. And yes, they will fall off and they will hurt themselves and they will think again. But Marquez was doing this for 10 years, and it took him 10 years to learn that I might hurt myself. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And then he did hurt himself. Do you know what I mean? And I just think, and I like personally myself, I don't think Rossi was ever the same when he fell off in Mugello and broke his leg. I just think there was the instant bit of fear put in there. Do you know what I mean? They always held him back compared to before.
Yeah, I don't think these guys have the emotion of fear in them. not being brave. That's different than being brave when you don't have that emotion of fear because you couldn't do it.
Let's call it doubt.
All right, doubt. Okay.
Yeah, doubt. Let's call it doubt rather than fear. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Whereas Marquez and Rossi had a similar thing, so they had big accidents, right? It was like they always got away with it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They had a red arse or a sore arse for a couple of days, but they were able to move on and ride the bike the next day and really fucking hurt themselves, right? And I think that doubt is creeping in. But I just think the next generation are coming up. Like, let's go back 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. We thought there would never be anyone to match Marc Marquez's style, how brave he was, this, that, and the other. And now, lads, you can count 5 or 6 people on the grid that are faster, braver. Do you know what I mean?
Well, that's why I mentioned 3 years. Because 3 years in the sport of MotoGP is a long time. 3 years at the age of young athletes like these that are riding the bikes, and the speed of development. It's a lot. Yeah. That train has moved a long way on since Marquez was on it.
Yeah.
I think I have a visitor here that would like to come on and say hello to the podcast.
Oh yeah.
Would you like to meet him?
Bring him on. Yeah.
1 second. Here he is. This is the PlayStation rider that I have to try and beat his laptop.
Yeah.
Hello.
Oh, here he is now.
Say hello.
Hey.
Hey.
Hello.
Say hello to everyone else as well.
Do you like the motorbikes?
Yeah.
Good man. I hear you got you a MotoGP game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite rider?
You beat him.
Rossi.
Oh, yeah. That's a good answer.
He's actually a Maverick Vinales fan.
Wow. Well, like me.
Yes.
Yeah.
See you, kiddo.
That's it. Now he's going to hide under his rock for a while after.
Cute kid.
Yes, he's a Vinales fan, not a Rossi fan.
Nothing wrong with that.
Well, there is if you're his dad and you're like, oh, come on, let's watch Rossi. No, I want to watch Maverick.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
But you know you can play 2-player games there, Mac. You know that. You can pick Rossi and he can pick Maverick, or you can pick Marquez and he can pick Maverick.
We'll do that now for the Christmas special.
Yeah.
We'll have GP22 and we'll have father versus son.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. I'll probably crash first. I know, knowing me, but anyway. Another thing actually I would talk about is Remy.
Yeah.
Very, very strange,
disappointing
things going on. Yeah, and like Pecco Sanchez or something, I think is his manager's name. He did come out and say that the KTM contracts are shit. And those are, to quote his exact words.
And he was right. I believe he's only on 80 grand.
Yeah, I think that was the figure. But he did tell Remy not to take the ride.
Yeah.
And Remy did take it, right? So that's one, right? The second thing was that the quote that was there, he was actually talking to a British journalist friend of his in an off-the-record chat in a hotel. So it wasn't actually an interview. And your man took that comment and ran with it. So that probably did get KTM's back up a small bit.
Yeah.
But it was really weird when Remy's dad put out a tweet or I think it was a tweet. Or maybe it was a tweet. Yeah. And basically saying, that Pecco or whatever his name is destroyed Remy's career with his petty arguments with
KTM.
And then Remy obviously followed it out with obviously that was not the case.
Backing up Pecco.
Yeah, but which is kind of weird.
Let's look at that particular situation. Firstly, the first thing I'd say is Wayne Gardner sacrificed a lot to put that kid on that bike, get him to Europe and to get him to ride. Mm-hmm. I don't know too much about the family situation other than that, but the fact is, when you look at when you look at the situation or the tweet that Gardner put out, he's not dissing KTM. He's having a go at Pecco. Probably safer to have a go at Pecco than have a go at the manufacturer.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that KTM never was saying we have the greatest bike in the world and the riders are lacking. You know, it's not like, you know, Honda used to do that with Marquez in 2019. But, you know, I don't blame KTM for being pissed off for catching shit, okay, when they didn't put out any. If they came out and said our bike is phenomenal and the riders just letting us down because they don't know how to ride, then I could say it. But why they were giving it in the beginning, I don't know. You know?
But look, for me in it, I think there's a couple of things, right? Remy came out and said that KTM told him that he wasn't professional enough, and obviously the KTM management team have said no, that's absolutely rubbish. I remember an interview with, I think it was Byra or maybe the CEO, and said, look, there's 3 people involved in Remy's contract, and I know for a fact that was not said. So maybe that was directed at Pecco Sanchez or whatever his name is, for his professional behavior, and maybe that's why Wayne Gardner wrote that. So the other thing I suppose, look, KTM have a history of throwing good riders out before their time. Okay, look at Petrucci, look at Lecona.
Lecona is a good example. Petrucci was too heavy for the bike.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't argue with him being thrown out. But look at it this way, and you go back to your point. But if Lecona was on that bike this year with Remy, I think you'd have a very different situation in that team.
Yeah. And look, I still reckon with Petrox, he could be too heavy for it, but he knows what a good bike feels like.
Yeah.
There's not one person there's not one person in that team that knows any other bike than a KTM.
No. But somebody had to go. They've got 2 factory riders. There's Binder and they've Oliveira on the factory team.
No, what I mean last year, right? They didn't need to bring both Remy and Raul up.
I agree. That's my point. So, I agree with that.
So they could have kept one of those KTM riders and seen the bigger picture. But I do believe that it's your man Ghigotti is basically telling Byra, I'll sort out the riders this year. You just go away and worry about the finances and running the team. I will sort out the rider. And I think that's why he brought in Jack Miller. Do you know what I mean? Get someone in that knows what a good bike feels like. The first test that Jack Miller does, that'll be the most valuable information to come back to, because it'll go in and I don't know, lads, have you ever changed jobs or whatever, right? And you go into a company and they don't have a tight system, just say for, I don't know, dealing with metrics or whatever, and you go, well, in my last job, this is how I did it, right?
Yeah.
Miller will get off that bike and go, well, on the Ducati, this is how it happens.
Yeah. Well, it's a fair point. It's a fair point you're making, but again, and I said it in one of the previous podcasts, unless Miller is going to bring the Ducati frame and the Olin shocks and the Brembo brakes, he's just still doing the same as Oliveira. He's riding the pig.
He is, yeah. Look, that's the thing, right? He can turn around and he can give a reference point to say, just say, for instance, the acceleration between second, third, fourth is not there. Going through tight right-handed corners, the Ducati frame flexes at this point of the corner. While he can't tell them how to build the frame and whatever, he can tell them what he feels. And I do believe that if they have a good engineering team, which they do have, because they're taking the Beast's engineer over to KTM. Do you know what I mean? So he has a lot of insight into
his crew chief, you mean?
Yeah. He's gone. So he's going to KTM. So I do think with Jack and maybe your man, they'll be able to translate. Maybe they won't, but I think that's their best chance to actually get what a good bike is. Now, saying that, Gas is and LCR are the only two open seats left on the grid because we all knew that the two boys in VR46. Well, it would have been hilarious actually if Joe they re-signed Bezzecchi and they told Marini, "On your bike, away you go." Joe,
Never going to happen. Never going to happen, man.
Joe,
Like, I mean, that announcement was probably the most, what do you call it, anticlimactic announcement there was. You know, was there even a need for announcement?
I'd actually say that Rossi's kid getting christened probably got more views than that news article that went out. To Joe.
And Marini's been looking better in the last few races. You know, in the beginning, he looked like.
Well, look, Jesus, if he doesn't go well at Misano, do you know what I mean? Like, and it's the same for Franco. Pack up and go home. Do you know what I mean? You do thousands of free laps around there and an all R1 or an R6. If you're not immediately hitting the ground there, there's no hope for you, like, you know.
Yeah, but I think KTM is dead in the water until they get rid of that trellis chassis. It's just over. You can only refine it so long. It's old tech. Refined so long. It's a dead end. So I don't.
You said this yourself, Mac. What Jake is saying. Like I look. I was optimistic about KTM from the beginning. I was excited to see the brand coming into Motogp. I was really rooting for the brand to see what they had done in the lower classes, that winning spirit that they brought to it. You know, I wouldn't be a big follower of the off-road stuff, but like certainly in the lower classes and the Red Bull rookies, you know, the talent development, and it did look like as if they were onto something. They came in with a bit of a bang. But the way they've operated in the last few years, and especially, you know, with you know, those moves last year and again this year, it's just a big thumbs down for me in terms of a fan.
But they've done miracles with a steel trellis frame because the rule of thumb used to be 200 horsepower, right? Yeah, that's all you could get to have the frame, the flex, and the stiffness balance. Then MV did it had made up the 240. Now they're at what 325. So they pulled off miracles with the frame. You can only
but they haven't really because it's a pig.
That's what I'm saying.
They've gone too far.
They've done miracles, but then they just hit a wall. You know, you can only do so much.
Yeah,
look, it's like having a Model T engine and you give it 3 times as much horsepower. You're going to run out of, you know.
But here's a comment. Could it be like? Here's what I see. It's an observation. You can tell me I'm wrong, but is there a certain pig-headedness amongst these top brass engineering management in KTM that just cannot see the wood for the trees here?
Yeah.
In terms of their development.
Look, I always believe, like, the trellis frame is something that the brand is built around. I must actually have a look at their motocross bikes because I don't think their motocross bikes are trellis framed.
Yeah, I think they are.
Are they?
Well, that bike that Petrucci rode in the Dakar had a trellis frame in it.
Yeah, but that's different. It's a Dakar bike now compared to their motocross. But I must have a close look at their. But I just think a trellis frame is their ethos. Do you know what I mean? Everything else is built around that trellis frame and that bright orange trellis frame.
Yeah,
and I do think no, but it's in a way it's a little bit arrogant that they won't understand that's the limit of the framework. And like I think what Pecco said, Joe, about Ducati's frame, so we've reached the development limit of that frame. It's a big statement to make.
Yeah,
Joe, what I mean, and I think that's exactly what KTM need to do. They need to abandon, not abandon it immediately, but I think I'll go back to it, right? They do need to put on an Olan's and see what happens.
Yeah.
They do need then to go, okay, you know, the bike is not turning, it's this, that, and the other, you know what I mean? Apples are apples and oranges are oranges, do you know what I mean? You have the same tires, you have the same wheels, you have the same brakes, you have the same suspension. Okay, what do we do in the chassis now? Because their engine is absolutely killer. It's just the chassis is the problem. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So if you remove the variables one by one, you can see the wood from the trees. But I just do think it's just KTM, I won't say ignorant, but being a bit ignorant to, okay, look, we have to go this way. As we've already said, Honda already own a brakes company, and a suspension company.
Yeah.
But they don't use them in MotoGP because they're not the best for them.
Well, to beat Calix, as we've seen in the last week, to get a swing arm to try and win. So at least they're showing that they're determined, that they're putting the need to win ahead of their own pride. Yeah.
Can you imagine if you were the head of the swing arm department in Japan? How fearful would you be for your job right now?
Remember, I've been saying they should use a Calix chassis, the whole thing. Remember?
Yeah.
And I think they have their Honda's chassis department is totally separate from their engine department. They don't mix. I was told this. Remember, Alan Green said they're totally different. He goes, one makes the frame separate, one makes the engine different. Where like Ducati, they're right next to each other and they work together.
Yeah, well, look, I think, I've said this from day one, is that, you know, the Japanese tend to build a bike and then bolt things on after. Do you know what I mean? And there is no communication and whatever. And when you look at the Europeans, you know, they're looking at, okay, the height of the petrol tank. Do you know what I mean? Could we take 3 mil off that because that will help us aerodynamically in the design phase? Do you know what I mean? So when that's made, then it's including, you know, the engine, the chassis, the aerodynamics, they're all included. And I would personally believe that there is probably Ducatis and Aprilias that are little blocks of clay put into a wind tunnel to test the aerodynamic forces of those, do you know what I mean, at a standstill, just to get an understanding. So whereas with Honda, we'll bolt on this wing and we'll see. You know, no one will ever see the wing, right? But we'll bolt this on after the fact, do you know what I mean, and try and re-engineer the bike that way. And I think that's where they're going now, and that's why I was so happy to see Honda's actually copying everyone. Like they even copied the Yamaha front wing, the original. Do you know what I mean? And they're seeing, and for me, that's brilliant. Do you know what I mean? They're looking. Now, it's very hard to understand someone's concept if you don't know what the concept actually was. Do you know what I mean? No. All they're doing is adapting a theory.
They've got to get the geometry right, the angles right. How did it know without getting their hands on the actual competitors' fairings and testing it in a wind tunnel?
Yeah. So for me, like while I was happy, I do believe that the next Honda may have aerodynamics included in the first drawing that is actually done of it, rather than, right, we have the bike, we have the chassis here, what the fairings look like. Now, how could we put a wing on this? Do you know what I mean? I think now that's all designed in front. Actually talking about testing and this, that, and the other, right? What do we think about dear old Cal Crutch, though, coming back? He's a man who's gone from zero to nothing. He's going to be another... So he's going to be a sore man like Marc Marquez. Huh?
I'd say you're talking about tendons and talking about fast, slow twitch fiber. I'd say he's a guy that's going to be sore for a few days.
What is it? 6 races and 2 tests in 8 weeks. That's his calendar.
Yeah. Well, at least he's getting, you know, he'll be getting up to speed. He'll be earning his money. Look, I think I heard a figure.
Straight. I said that he shoots straight. Cal Crutcho pulls no punches. Remember when he got on the Yamaha and said, this thing's unstable? And before anybody had said anything, he was just like, it didn't go over well, but he spit it right out. Yeah.
You know, Honda tried to lure him back as a test rider back from Yamaha. Yeah, they offered him to go back. He wouldn't go back. He's happier to stay with Yamaha.
It was too dangerous.
Maybe it's too dangerous. Yeah. Like the thing is, look, Cal, he's nothing left to prove. He had a good run at it. I mean, he came into MotoGP to try and take a title. He gave it a good run. He never got the breaks. Look, I thought he was going to make a go for it. I was disappointed with what happened with Ducati. That was his best possible opportunity, and it didn't work out for him. After that,
do you think he got so obsessed with having a factory bike that it blinded him?
I think it did. Yeah.
Well, look at Martin. You could say, look.
Yeah.
Martin is obsessed with a factory bike. Anybody that's in that position wants to be on a factory bike. Look at Top Rock, Keenan. They won't go to MotoGP unless they get a factory seat.
Yeah.
Come on, it's sort of given in MotoGP that unless
I don't understand it. I don't understand when they say, okay, you can go in, but it's not a factory bike. You're not on the factory team, but you have a factory bike. That's the perfect opportunity because you get all the materials and the parts, but you don't have the pressure.
Yeah, I think though. The satellite teams though, they're always kind of 1 or 2 steps behind the main factory, and I think that's where I think you're spot on, and I think you're 100% right with it. That there are riders out there that are fascinated with it, like, and this comes to one of my points ages ago. Would I prefer to be on a Honda or a 2022 Ducati next year? Yeah. I'd prefer to be on the Ducati, even though it's a year old in the satellite team.
It's interesting
because I think a little bit different. Because like if I'm winning on a year-old bike, what would happen when you put me on this year's bike?
Yeah, that's how Bastianini was found. Remember, he was on 2019. They said, "Look how good he did it with 2019."
Yep.
Well, there was a video put out on YouTube today and on Alex Rins, and it was quoting an interview by Alex Rins, and Alex Rins was making this point, and directly after the Alex Rins quotation, there was a quotation from Miguel Oliveira, and Rins was saying the opposite of what you said there, Mac. Right? Mm-hmm. He would rather be on a factory-supported Honda, albeit a complete pig, unproven at the minute in terms of competitiveness. He would rather be on that bike as opposed to being on a year-old Ducati or a year-old Aprilia, right? Whereas Miguel Oliveira was saying the opposite. He would far rather be on a year-old proven bike like a Ducati, or in his case now an Aprilia, than be on a factory bike that wasn't working.
Yep,
that's because he's smarter.
If you're up in the top 5 consistently on an old bike, your name is good. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Look at I don't know. Do you follow the British Superbikes, right?
Yeah.
But like Josh Brooks, Tom Sykes, tail end Charlie's this year practically.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Josh Brooks was a top contender. He was. Did he win it?
He's champion.
He was a champion. Yeah.
On a Ducati, and he's just gone backwards the past 2. And so my question is like, would in British Superbikes, would you prefer to be on a Yamaha or a Ducati? Of course, you want to be on a Yamaha because Yamahas are winning. Do you know what I mean? And they're the better bike for that series with no electronics. But and it's just for me, I just look at it as that if you, as a rider, you have a year or 2 year contract, right? And after that 2 years, if you've had a shit 2 years, you know what I mean? Your stock value goes down, your price goes down, and you may not get re-signed.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? Whereas if you have 2 years finishing, mid to high top 10s. You're going to get re-signed, and you're probably going to make more of an impact to factories by saying, this guy is actually on an older bike and he's still doing the business. Do you know what I mean? Whereas, let's put him on a new bike. And you saw with Ducati and the Beast, he earned it.
He did earn it.
Ducati were very fair to him as well. Do you know what I mean? If they upgraded Martin's bike, they gave him an upgrade as well, the exact same. But I just thought that, we know, like, would you prefer to be on a KTM or a 21 Ducati next year?
Yeah, and today when you're on a bike that needs development and needs to be fixed, it's not like the old days where they say, "Well, I can fix this on the off season." They don't have the testing, so it takes 2 years to get the bike right. Or maybe 3 years to get the bike right. It's not,
Well, that's a big mistake.
Yeah,
and I know they went down that route to try and save money, but they ended up doing the opposite.
Oh, I know.
It's costing them more.
Yeah. I just think
more.
I just think it's interesting, Joe. And I suppose look, that argument can go on and go on and go on, but like look, and it's down to each person's own personal preference, I suppose. Maybe it gives Rins more confident being on a factory bike, but like he's not full factory supported in the way of like his equipment is not the exact same as Repsol Honda's.
Yeah.
His equipment is a couple of weeks behind. Do you know what I mean?
But you know what I think? I think his statement is BS. I think he's covering up for something else, and it's probably down to money and probably down to being no contract there in the first place.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Maybe. Look, it's just one of those things.
Marquez was the guy they wanted, not Rins, in that Gresini team, which is where he really had a position. Because I don't think he was he was headhunted for RNF. Okay, he was in the loop all right, but I would imagine it possibly money as well.
Possibly.
This is just a story Alex is telling, because that bike is the least suited to his style. That Honda, and it's the most difficult to ride.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, look, as Jake said when we told about Rins signing his Honda deal, buy stock in Johnson & Johnson because Rins is a crasher. Do you know what I mean? Like that's and that's true. And it's unless Honda drastically change the bike, which I don't think they are going to. I think they're going to change it more to Marc Marquez style and kick the can down the road to an owner manager's problem when Pooch gets out the door. But yeah,
that's not going to suit. That's not going to suit Rins because he's long and he has that what we call that style, the high call leading with the chin into the corners. One thing that you mentioned the test, I hadn't seen that recent test on the 600, right, Marquez, but I'd seen the previous one, and I'm watching him on the RCV as well. Like the one thing I notice about him is because of his size, his center of gravity is so low. He's so low to the seat of the bike in tandem with the tank and everything in the bike. His speed of direction, because he's so low and squat into the bike, he's able to just move his body with the bike very fast. That speed of direction very quickly. That creates completely different dynamic in the bike if it's set up to suit that than the long slow rounded. Yeah.
And look, the long levers as well, cause more issues with tires and all of that as well. So look, it's going to be interesting. Like I kind of wish he didn't sign for HRC, but in LCR. But look, he
needed a seat. They were both going to stick with Suzuki. They got their whole season, their whole universe, you could say, was smashed with the exit of Suzuki. And it was a salvage operation for the two of them to try and find seats. And unfortunately, the seats that suited them or that were available for them were with Honda. And that's where they are.
I genuinely reckon, though, right, and this is just me, the whole talk of Top Rack coming, I think Yamaha were expecting Fabio to jump.
You think so?
And I think they expected him to jump to Suzuki or Ducati. That's why, and because everything changed as soon as Suzuki made their announcement, that took 90% of Fabio's bargaining power out because Ducati had already come out and said it's nearly between these two boys. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm really curious to what Fabio's contract, how much money it came out to be, because originally he wanted the same money as Marquez.
Did he?
Yeah.
25 million.
Yep. Yeah. Well, he owns
that's cheap development, though.
Yeah. Well, that's development. You're kicking the can down the road for development, as you say.
Yeah.
You're just having a rider.
Saving yourself, what, 100 million a year by paying him 25.
Yeah.
It's high stakes game, isn't it?
Yes, it is. What do you guys think about, Marquez's statement that he's not going to change his riding style? That kind of threw me because I thought, hold a second. If you have a rear bias tire bike developed. It was developed for a rear bias tire, and he's a front tire bias guy. Is he going to have to change his style, whether he likes to or not?
I don't know. Was it that he was going to change his style in how he approached his race?
Oh, well, I can't.
Like, is he like in that one? Was that what he meant by I'm still going to have a go. But then in another breath, he was like, I have also, I've also started to mature. You know what I mean? And like, this is where what I mentioned earlier about is that doubt there. Of like, I know if I
just for his own safety.
Well, I want to make a comment here because you touched on this earlier, and I was going to say it, I didn't get a chance. The big factor that we're not considering here, right? When we consider fear, because look, there's nobody gets up on a bike and rides it flat out that has fear in their mind. You can't. You know yourselves, guys. You have her pinned, and you're like coming into corners. You just have to trust. You just have to have.
You can't think about it at all.
No. It doesn't come into it. So here's the factor that is the elephant in the room. The big factor that comes into play after horrific injuries and life-threatening injuries and horrific pain. It's the subconscious mind. And Sigmund Freud, the famous psychologist, made a famous quote one time. He said, "The conscious mind." So that's the mind that's changing the gears and that's on the bike that we're thinking with, is only a puppet of the unconscious. And I used to have a diagram one time of the mind where it was compared to an iceberg. And the iceberg had, the iceberg has maybe it's only like 10% of the iceberg is actually up over the water, but 90% is underneath. That's the unconscious mind. And that's where all the memory is stored of the pain, of the recovery, of the fear and everything else. You're not conscious of it. But when you're on the track, and we've seen it with Martin, I really firmly believe that what we've experienced with Martin this year is that unconscious mind starting to kick in. Self-preservation. It's hardwired into every single one of us. And that's why when you said Rossi was never the same after that injury, that's probably why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and look, it's like and like look, we won't go into conscious and unconscious mindsets, right? But like, there's a massive thing in this world called unconscious bias. And have you ever looked at something, something to eat and said, "No, I won't like that," but like you never even tasted it, so how do you know? Do you know what I mean? And that's a perfect example of unconscious bias. And you're probably right, Ghost. I do think, and like within that subconscious or mindset is actually the easiest way to put it is doubt. Do you know what I mean? That you're just not the same racer, or you're just not the same person to take it to the edge, because when you go into the corner, like I often wonder to myself, Joe, like let's just look at that turn in Jerez where Marc fell. Imagine going through that again. Every single time you go through that, that's like a trigger. I'm not going to crack the gas too early. I'm not going to crack the gas too early. I'm not going to crack the... And it's probably coming 2 corners up. Or before that, you're like, okay, make sure that it's on the fat part of the tire. I'm not going to crack that gas. And that's constant. Like, it just doesn't go away. Do you know what I mean? And I genuinely do think that it's changed him anyway. I do believe it changed Rossi.
I know personally, I had a bad accident, put me in the hospital. I was 15. I'm riding without a license. And to this day, when I go past, there was a hill, it goes down, and the spoke went through the tire. It went through the tube, and then it hit the rim, which was metal, so it just slid out from under me. Anyhow, to this day, I still back off, and it's just a straight line. You know what I mean? I feel like the tire's going to blow. And I
have a bit of a flashback. There's a process going on in the mind, and what's happening there is the subconscious is now trying to fight the conscious part of the mind. And unfortunately, the subconscious is more powerful.
Yeah. And the two battle, and then your colon clinches, and you just take a breath and get through it.
And how many of us, we've all been on a track day, and you ever been mad or a street, and you're pissed off, and you're flying, and you go incredibly fast because
you can't remember.
You're not thinking about crashing. You're not thinking about anything else.
Yeah,
I have a little bit of a temper, believe it or not, and you get angry, and nothing's. All you see is red, and you don't think about
that red mist. That red mist is something brilliant. And look, talking about red mist. World Superbikes, Johnny Ray and Bautista.
I'm glad you mentioned it. Very interesting incident there. The internet is absolutely on fire with this with this headline, with this impression that Jonathan Rea intentionally took Bautista off the bike, that he aimed to run into him. Make of it what you will, guys. But that's what's currently being said. And Bautista hasn't done anything to quell that fire. In fact, he's the one that's pouring petrol on it. Have you seen the incident?
I have. Yeah, personally, I think. Yeah, look, I think the penalty was deserved. Like he got it wrong.
Yeah.
But he went into Bautista after, and no helmet on, no cameras around. Went in and spoke to him, man v man, and I think it's closed. Matter is closed now. He was penalised, and correctly penalised. But I don't think he ever intended to take him out. Did he intend to have a close pass on him? Yes, and the only reason was that's the only place that he could pass the Ducati. He couldn't pass him at the end of the straight. He couldn't pass him under acceleration. Bautista didn't run wide. There was a slight gap there. Yes, he might have had to wedge it open a small bit, but personally myself, I think he's not a dirty rider. He is an aggressive rider, but he's not a dirty rider.
I saw it. He just got in too hot. The bike wasn't set up all weekend that great. He slid both tires and just was going too wide and ran into him. I mean, it was a racing incident. And like I said, Toprak, he bashed into Bautista, ripped off a piece of the fairing to the point where he ripped the...
I don't know, though, did you see the sprint race? But coming down to the last lap, in the last corner, Bautista actually touched Rea.
No, I didn't see that.
Go have a look at that one. But Bautista's not mentioning this bit. Do you know what I mean?
Well, but the Toprak hit that. He tore the whole overflow tank out. Now he should have got one. If Rea got one, he should have got one because those
that
two
wing
guys going at it all.
And that wing hit Rea, I think.
Did it? Yeah. I mean, but they've been going at it so hard. If both of them need to be calmed down a little bit because now it's starting to overflow into other riders.
Yeah.
And I'm all for close racing, but if you want to, I'm being liberal enough to say if you're going to beat the hell out of each other, that's fine, but don't do it to everybody else. Don't start bashing your way through. And Toprak's actually the worst offender of that.
Well, he is. You could say Marquez is like that as well in MotoGP. But the thing is, and I'll say this about Jonathan Rea, he's a gentleman. His behavior is absolutely impeccable. He's a professional racer. He calls it as it is. And there's no vindictiveness in him at all. And if anything, the whole incident to me shows how much of a poor sport that Bautista is, and how less of a man he is, that he wasn't able to put the hand out and say like Espargo did with Fabio back in Assen when Fabio knocked him off the bike and drove him into the gravel. Put the hands up and he shook the hands like rubbing is racing. This is
it's not tennis. You know what I mean?
The guy has gone on the rampage, Bautista, talking to every major outlet, pushing the narrative, strongly pushing the narrative that Rea intentionally rammed him off the road and that the penalty wasn't strong enough and he wants action.
No, actually, Toprak hitting him was more intentional, and it was still a racing incident, but he was trying to make a spot that wasn't there. He took away his racing line and hit him.
I tell you, to be honest, right? If you go and watch the Superstock race in Snetterton for the BSB, you will see, there's this fella coming in, and the last turn in Snetterton is quite tight, left-hander. But your man lost it, and another fella was coming out of the corner, and the bike speared across the track and literally cleaned your man straight out. Do you know what I mean? And I think your man got a penalty for being stupid or whatever. But anyway, do you know what I mean? It's club racing. These things happen. Do you know what I mean? These guys are on a world level. Do you know what I mean? If they're afraid of a bit of fairing bashing, go home.
Yeah.
Do you know, it's, this is what it's come down to now is that bike performances, the rules in the competition, in my view, are penalising some riders and manufacturers and not penalising others, or only somewhat penalising things. And for me, I'm just like, okay, well, Dorna, you're actually causing the problem here by doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Level the bikes out. If you're able to level out the bikes in 600s, you can level out the bikes in Superbikes.
And I don't believe in leveling out anything because it's racing. The object is to go as fast as you can.
But look,
no one should have a penalty for having a bike that's too fast, which they hit Kawasaki for twice and Ducati for once. It's ridiculous.
I agree with you, and I disagree in another way. Right? I think they should just turn around and say, lads, you have 240 brake horsepower and 125 kilo. Just say, right, for instance, go build a bike to that.
I don't buy that one. I don't like that. I think that I'll let the best man win. More.
But you see, this
best engineers win. Best manufacturer win. You know?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. But the thing is, they are trying to create a spectacle. They're trying to entertain people. The sport is the purpose of the sport from their perspective is to put bums on seats and put people watching it and get people excited. And to do that, they need to create a spectacle. Now, here's a point, right? I wanted to make because you've made the point, and I agree with it. That not so much in Superbikes, but in MotoGP, it's prototype racing, and there should be no hindering technology. Now, when it comes to the point of the ECU, that standard ECU that was brought in across all manufacturers, that was brought in to put a ceiling on it, right? So that they would level the playing field as such through the electronics. Now, I would argue that leveling, banning and restricting electronics has led to the full-on drive in aero. That's where aero has.
Yeah, that's where ride height came from. That's where ride height came from. But when they did that, and it was they took the active suspension away, that's when they started the ride height.
So for everything here, for every cause, there's an effect. It's like the limiting the testing, the money goes up.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, it's easy for us, say, armchair pundits, to sit here and to say how it should be, you know. But you know, if we were in there running it, we'd probably be facing the same problems.
Yeah, but one thing about performance, like you've mentioned, performance, it levels itself out. If Kawasaki has something and Yamaha doesn't, right? Eventually, it's very quickly Yamaha will pick up what Kawasaki did, and they'll have the same thing. So you don't. I don't believe in saying, well, this RPM limiting, right? Look what they did to Kawasaki, and Kawasaki has the oldest engine design.
Absolutely, I think that's a disgrace. I think it's a disgrace. It's like Kawasaki. They focused on that series. That's where they put all their marbles into that series, and they've done extremely successful. Ray has you know, he's done fantastic. Like, isn't his record as a Superbike champion is the best record. He's 6-time world champion, and now you can see him in those races where he's restricted. Top Rack is Yamaha has got faster and faster and faster as the series has gone on. The Kawasaki just looks out of shape a lot of the time, and like that Ducati, don't get me started on Ducatis, but they're running away from him this year. He's not able to compete with them.
Oh no! Well, the Ducati doesn't handle as well because that Motogp suspension or chassis they just did that for sales. So they actually need the power to stay relevant. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, but that's fine. But like, you know, when you look at Ducati going down the straight compared to the Quack, there is no comparison.
Oh God, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that is all horsepower. And that's not just Bautista. It's Rinaldi and it's the other fella. Was it Pacini? No, whatever his name is. You know, they were pissing past the Yamaha too. It showed to be easy, and we won't talk about Ray down the straight because it was just embarrassing.
Yeah. Well, V4 is always having a performance advantage over an inline 4.
I don't know
that. Yeah, I mean, so
dear Yamaha, please listen to Jake's last book.
I think that's coming 2024. I know. Yeah, I think it's just taking a long time without testing. You know.
Yeah. But look, lads, I think we'll wrap it up there for this week. Thank you so much, for joining. It was another good and healthy debate. We have Aragon this week, so we will try and be back again early next week, and we'll have a look and see what happens there. Any ideas, lads? Who's going to be fastest man on Friday?
I'll have to put it down to Pecco.
Yeah. Yeah. I hate to do them, but probably Pecco. Yeah.
I'll go for the beast. So we at least have a different. We at least have a different. You know, and I can send you an old WhatsApp with a middle finger or something if I'm right. But
anyway, I think Brilliant made an engine update because they can't use it though. That's right. That's right.
They can't use it. Yeah.
Did you know they made a chassis update from Brilliant?
They did.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just lighter. It's coming out in the video tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
The man's a miracle.
I know. Yeah. I know.
No, I mean he knows all the dirt. I'm telling you, he must stay up at night just you know.
I do. Yeah. Anyway, sure. Listen. Thank you so much again, lads, and we'll be back again next week with another podcast.
Okay.
Peace out,
guys.
I just want to take a minute to also thank you for watching my videos and the support that you've shown so far. If you haven't subscribed already and you would like to subscribe, it would mean an awful lot to me if you did. I'm starting this channel realistically so that we can all enjoy MotoGP together with the aim of streaming a live video when the GP races are on.